Your wedding was cheap enough. Your brother deserves better. My father announced this while raising a glass of champagne at my brother's engagement party, surrounded by 50 guests who nodded along like he'd said something perfectly reasonable. $3,000 in a backyard versus $80,000 at a country club, and somehow, I was the one who should feel grateful. What my father didn't realize was that his casual cruelty had just set the stage for the most satisfying moment of my entire life. My name is Miranda Ashford, and I spent the first 28 years of my life believing I was worth less than my brother. Growing up in Hartford, Connecticut, I was the classic overlooked daughter in a family that worshipped its son. My younger brother, Gavin, was born 3 years after me, and from the moment he arrived, I became a supporting character in his story. My parents, Douglas and Vivian Palmer, weren't poor. My father was a mid-level executive at an insurance company, and my mother worked as an office administrator at a law firm. We lived in a comfortable house, took modest vacations, and never wanted for necessities. But when it came to extras, opportunities, attention, investment, those went to Gavin. Gavin got the private baseball coaching. Gavin got the SAT tutoring. Gavin got the car for his 16th birthday while I took the bus until I could afford to buy my own. The justification was always the same: Gavin had potential. Gavin was going places. Gavin needed the support to reach his destiny. I learned early that my role was to be self-sufficient. So that's what I became. I worked part-time jobs through high school, earned scholarships for college, and put myself through an MBA program while working full-time. I climbed the corporate ladder with the determination of someone who knew no one was waiting at the bottom to catch her. By 28, I was the chief financial officer of a mid-sized tech company in Boston, a position that came with a salary my parents couldn't have imagined and responsibilities that would have terrified them. But I never told them. Not because I was ashamed, but because I'd learned that my accomplishments were never celebrated in my family. They were minimized, dismissed, or turned into reasons why Gavin needed more help. When I got my MBA, my mother's response was, "That's nice, but Gavin is really struggling with his marketing degree. Could you help him with his resume?" When I got promoted to director, my father said, "Must be nice to have a cushy office job while your brother is out there hustling." So I stopped sharing. I gave vague answers about work, I'm in finance, and let them assume I was a secretary or bookkeeper. It was easier than watching them find ways to diminish everything I'd earned. The only person who knew the truth was my husband, Nathan, and his family. Nathan Ashford was everything my family wasn't: warm, supportive, genuinely proud of other people's success. I met him at a conference when I was 26. He was an architect, creative and kind, and he saw me in a way no one in my family ever had. "You're remarkable," he told me on our third date. "Do you know that?" I didn't. But he spent the next 2 years convincing me. We got married when I was 28. It was a small ceremony, 30 guests in his parents' backyard in Vermont, catered by a local restaurant, decorated with flowers from a farmer's market. Total cost, $3,000, most of which Nathan and I paid ourselves. My parents contributed nothing. Not a cent. "We're saving for Gavin's future," my mother explained when I asked if they could help with the catering. "You understand? You've always been so independent." Independent. Their favorite word for me. It meant, not worth investing in. Nathan's parents, Richard and Caroline Ashford, were appalled when they learned my family wasn't contributing to our wedding. Richard, a retired corporate attorney, and Caroline, a former professor, had raised Nathan with the belief that families supported each other unconditionally. "They're not coming to the wedding at all?" Caroline asked, stunned. "They're coming," I said. "They're just not participating." My parents did attend. They sat in the back, complained about the 2-hour drive, and left early because Gavin had a softball game the next morning. They didn't give a toast, didn't help with setup or cleanup, and gave us a card with $50 inside. "It's the thought that counts," my mother said. The thought, apparently, was that I counted for very little. 3 years after my backyard wedding, Gavin got engaged. His fiancée, Brittany, was exactly the kind of woman my parents adored: pretty, pleasant, and completely focused on Gavin's happiness. She worked as a dental hygienist, which my parents described as a real job in a way that made clear they didn't consider my work to be one. The engagement party was held at my parents' house, and Nathan and I were expected to attend. I didn't want to go, but Nathan convinced me that skipping it would only create more drama. "One evening," he said. "We'll show our faces, be polite, and leave. Then you never have to think about it again." He was right, in theory. In practice, the evening turned out to be anything but forgettable. The party was larger than I expected, 50 people, including extended family and Brittany's parents. My mother had hired a caterer. There were flowers, a photographer, and a champagne fountain that probably cost more than my entire wedding. I noticed the scale of the event but didn't comment. I'd long ago stopped expecting equal treatment. Then my father made his announcement. He stood up, tapping his glass, commanding the room's attention with the ease of a man who'd always been listened to. "I want to make a toast to Gavin and Brittany," he said, beaming. "My son, my pride and joy, is finally getting married. And Vivian and I have decided that we're going to give them the wedding they deserve. We're paying for everything, the venue, the catering, the flowers, the band. The whole thing. $80,000 for the perfect day." The room erupted in applause. Gavin looked genuinely surprised, hugging our father with tears in his eyes. Brittany clutched her chest like she'd won the lottery. I sat frozen in my seat. $80,000. For Gavin's wedding. When they'd given me nothing. My father continued, still riding the wave of adulation. "We know it's a big investment, but Gavin is worth it. Besides," he glanced in my direction with a smirk, "Miranda's wedding was cheap enough. She didn't need anything fancy. Gavin deserves better." He said it like a joke. A few people laughed nervously. I felt Nathan's hand tighten on mine. Cheap enough. Deserves better. 28 years of being second place, and my father had finally said it out loud. But before I could respond, before I could decide whether to cry, scream, or simply leave, a voice cut through the room. "Should I tell them what my daughter-in-law does for a living?" It was Richard. My father-in-law. He'd leaned forward in his chair, his expression mild but his eyes sharp. My father laughed. "She's just a secretary, Dick. Nothing to write home about." The room was silent. I felt 50 pairs of eyes turn toward me, waiting. Richard smiled. The kind of smile I'd seen him use in courtrooms, right before he demolished an opposing argument. "She's the CFO of Meridian Technologies. One of the fastest-growing tech companies on the East Coast. She oversees a budget larger than you'll earn in 10 lifetimes, Douglas. She's been featured in Forbes, invited to speak at Harvard Business School, and last year, she was named one of Boston's top 40 under 40. The silence in the room became absolute. Richard stood up slowly, deliberately. "My daughter-in-law paid for her own education, built her own career, and asked nothing from anyone, including you. The wedding she and Nathan had wasn't cheap enough. It was exactly what they wanted because they didn't need your money to validate their love." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But please, tell me more about how your son deserves better than a woman who could buy this house with her quarterly bonus." My father's face had gone from smug to pale to something approaching purple. That's not." He stammered. "Not what?" Richard asked calmly. "Not true? I have her last 3 tax returns if you'd like to verify. Not relevant? I'd argue that publicly humiliating your daughter while bragging about funding your son deserves some context." He turned to look at me, his expression softening. "Miranda, I'm sorry. I know you didn't want to make a scene. But some things shouldn't go unchallenged." I found my voice. "It's okay, Richard. Thank you." I stood up, and the room seemed to hold its breath. "I wasn't going to say anything," I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. "I've spent my whole life not saying anything. Not when you skipped my graduation to take Gavin to a baseball tournament. Not when you used my college fund for his tutoring. Not when you gave me $50 for my wedding and called it generous." My mother's face crumpled. "Miranda, we didn't know." "You didn't ask," I interrupted. "You never asked. You assumed I was nothing because it was convenient to believe that. It made it easier to justify pouring everything into Gavin while I figured things out on my own." I looked at my brother, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. "I don't blame you, Gavin. You were a kid when this started, and by the time you were old enough to notice, the pattern was already set. But I need you to understand something. I'm not jealous of your wedding. I don't want Mom and Dad's money. What I wanted, what I've always wanted, was to matter. To be seen as worth investing in. And they made it clear, over and over, that I wasn't." I turned back to my parents. $80,000 for Gavin's wedding. Nothing for mine. And you announced it publicly, in front of everyone, like it was something to be proud of. I shook my head. "I used to think if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, you'd finally see me. But you were never going to see me, were you? Because seeing me would mean admitting you were wrong." My father finally found his voice. "Now, Miranda, you're being dramatic. We always supported you. Name one time," I said flatly. "Name one time you supported me the way you've supported Gavin. One graduation you attended without leaving early. One accomplishment you celebrated without turning the conversation back to him. One investment you made in my future." He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "Nothing." That's what I thought. I picked up my purse. Nathan stood beside me, his hand on my back. "Congratulations on your engagement, Gavin. Brittany, I hope you have the wedding of your dreams. But Nathan and I won't be attending. I've spent enough of my life showing up for people who never showed up for me." We walked toward the door. "Miranda, wait," my mother called. I stopped but didn't turn around. "If you want to have a relationship with me, you know where to find me. But it's going to require something you've never given me before: acknowledgement. That you treated me differently. That you dismissed me. That you owe me an apology, a real one, not an excuse dressed up as an explanation. I finally turned to look at her. I'm not holding my breath. I stopped holding my breath for this family a long time ago. But the door isn't completely closed. That's more than you've ever given me. Then we left. The aftermath was complicated. Gavin called me 3 days later. To his credit, he didn't make excuses for our parents. I didn't know, he said. About the college fund, about how they treated you differently. I mean, I knew they were harder on you, but I thought. I don't know what I thought. That you were just more independent, I guess. That's what they wanted you to think. I'm sorry, Miranda. I really am. I don't want to lose you as a sister. You haven't. But things need to change. I can't keep showing up to be humiliated while everyone pretends it's normal. He agreed. We've been rebuilding our relationship slowly, without our parents as intermediaries. It's not perfect, but it's honest. My parents took longer. My mother sent a series of emails over the following months, first defensive, then guilt-tripping, then finally, genuinely apologetic. She admitted things I'd never heard her say out loud, that they'd always seen. Gavin as fragile and me as strong, that they'd confused my independence for not needing them, that they'd failed me in ways they were only beginning to understand. My father's apology came 6 months later, after Richard sent him a detailed letter outlining exactly how much money I'd earned, donated, and invested over the past decade. I don't think Richard should have done that. It felt like reducing my worth to numbers, but it worked in a way nothing else had. My father finally understood that I wasn't the struggling secretary he'd imagined. I was the most successful person in our family, and I'd done it entirely without his help. I'm proud of you, he said when we finally talked. I should have said that years ago. Yes, I agreed. You should have. We're working on it. I'm not sure we'll ever have the relationship I wanted as a child, but I've stopped needing their approval to feel worthy. That shift happened long before Richard's speech. It happened when I built a life that proved my worth to myself. Gavin's wedding was beautiful. I know because I saw the photos. I didn't attend. Instead, Nathan and I renewed our vows that weekend, a small ceremony in Vermont, at the same backyard where we'd married 5 years earlier. Richard and Caroline were there. A few close friends. No one who needed to be convinced of my value. The total cost was about $4,000 this time. We splurged on the champagne. After the ceremony, Richard raised a glass. To Miranda, he said, who never needed anyone to tell her she was worth investing in. She invested in herself, and she's paid dividends to everyone lucky enough to know her. Nathan squeezed my hand. To Miranda, everyone echoed. I finally felt like I was home. Some families measure love in dollars: who gets the most, who deserves the best, who's worth the investment. But real love isn't transactional. It doesn't keep score. The people who truly love you don't need to see your tax returns to know your worth. They see it in how you show up, how you persevere, how you build something meaningful from nothing. I spent years trying to earn my parents' love through achievement. In the end, I learned that their love was never mine to earn, it was theirs to give freely, and they chose not to. That's not my failure. It's theirs. But I found my people. And with them, I'm never cheap enough. I'm exactly right.